Hey guys, tonight, we drift back to a time before white noise machines and melatonin gummies, before anyone whispered sleep hygiene into a podcast mic. You're standing at the edge of a Victorian bedroom where the flicker of gaslight dances across wallpapered walls, casting long shadows that make you feel like the room itself is breathing. It's the 1880s, and you, my dear insomniac, are not alone. Sleeplessness has infected every corner of upper-crust society. The wealthy lie in canopy beds wide-eyed at midnight, and poor chimney sweeps dream only of dreaming. The air smells faintly of rosewater and coal smoke. Somewhere beyond the window pane, a horse-drawn cab creaks by. You rub your eyes. You're exhausted, but sleep has taken a personal day. Again. You probably won't survive this century. Not from a duel or dysentery, but because your body slowly unravels from the inside, one sleepless night at a time. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slide your aching feet into slippers and pad down the hallway, trailing the scent of camphor and starch. No one admits it aloud, but half your neighbors are awake too. The streets are silent, but the city is humming. London never quite sleeps, and neither do its people. Victorian society is obsessed with two things: status and sleep, or rather, the inability to get any. And lately, you're realizing that your sleeplessness isn't just a personal problem, it's a crisis. Everyone's pretending they've cured with a stiff upper lip. But that's not working anymore. You glance over a letter from your cousin in Manchester. She writes, "Do try the lettuce decoction, darling. It's dreadfully bitter, but I slept straight through Father's snoring." You squint at the phrase. Lettuce. You're not even sure it counts as food, let alone medicine. But stranger things have happened. This is after all the century where people inject strychnine for energy and wear magnets in their corsets to realign vital energies. Your sleeplessness has started to feel like a secret club, only instead of passwords you share recipes and rumors. A friend of a friend swears by a lettuce soup recipe she clipped from the Lady's Own Journal. A herbalist in Soho sells a syrup that lists Lactuca virosa wild lettuce as its star ingredient. It's said to soothe the nervous constitution, though historians still argue whether it did anything beyond giving you a quiet placebo. You're not sure when sleep became something you had to earn. But lately, it feels like an achievement. A trophy. You go to bed with lavender on your pillow and hope in your heart, and wake up 5 hours later blurry and annoyed. There's a strange intimacy to this new nighttime culture. Families adjust their schedules around rest cures. Entire pamphlets are printed just to tell you what kind of pillow encourages the purest, most virtuous sleep. One physician recommends without irony that reading the Book of Job aloud before bed can knock out the most stubborn of insomniacs. Another swears by regulating bowel movements. Meanwhile, the newspapers print tragic tales of men driven mad by sleeplessness. You read one over tea and nearly drop your cup a barrister unhinged. Sleep denied 6 days. The poor fellow ended up stark naked in Kensington Gardens babbling about clocks. But you'd settle for 4 hours and a dream about toast. You head to the drawing room where someone has left the day's issue of The Lancet. An anonymous letter in the back column reads, "Insomnia has become a plague upon this once efficient nation. We are awake beyond reason. Below it, an editor has scrawled, perhaps fewer oysters and more self-control. Classic Victorians, where there's a health problem, there's a moral failing. Still beneath the sarcasm, something darker simmers. This isn't just sleeplessness. It's fear. Fear that you've lost control of your mind. That rest is no longer your right, but something you have to beg for. And in a world governed by social rituals and tight schedules, that's terrifying. Tonight you light a single candle and stare into the flickering flame, wondering if plain boring, crunchy lettuce could really fix this. Not the opiates, not the whiskey, not the long sermons or goose feather mattresses, but lettuce. Could the answer to your midnight madness really be something that's usually shoved under a slice of cold beef? You're intrigued, because let's face it, nothing else has worked. And as your body aches and your mind spirals again, you know you'll try almost anything for rest, even lettuce water. You stare at the ceiling, its plaster medallion distorted by the flickering candlelight, and wonder if your nerves have finally bested you. The phrase nervous exhaustion echoes in your head like a diagnosis and a curse. It's the fashionable affliction of the age, particularly among those with more letters than labor in their daily lives. If you're wealthy, sleeplessness is not merely inconvenient, it's almost expected. The Victorians have a word for everything, and you're discovering they've built an entire vocabulary around not sleeping. You're told your constitution is delicate. Your brain is overstimulated by the telegraph. Your sensibilities are fatigued from novel reading. Whatever the excuse, it's all lumped together into that nebulous diagnosis neurasthenia. The term was coined only a few decades ago, but it's already sweeping upper-class drawing rooms faster than lace-trimmed gossip. The curse of the thinking class, they whisper. You don't have the heart to remind them that not everyone stays awake pondering Aristotle. Sometimes, like now, your brain just won't shut up about whether you forgot to lock the coal bin. Doctors, the respectable ones, at least blame the modern condition. The steam engine, the postal service, the electric bell. Even too much conversation is suspect. Your physician, Dr. Humblethwaite, once told you, without blinking, that speaking with excitable people after 4 p.m. could delay restful brain activity. You're still not sure if that was a medical opinion or a veiled insult to your aunt. Historians still argue whether neurasthenia was a true condition or a polite umbrella under which to place everything from depression to low iron to boredom. Whatever it was, it gave people like you exhausted and jittery a way to explain the gnawing insomnia without sounding entirely mad. You pace the rug. Beneath your feet, a thick Turkish weave muffles the soft pad of your slippers. You pass the grandfather clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. A metronome for misery. At some point, sleep stopped being something you slipped into naturally. Now it feels like a prize you haven't earned. Your maid Elsie recently admitted that her sister tried something newfangled on her employer's orders. Cold lettuce poultice wrapped around the forehead. Smelled like a garden, she said, but Lady Bingham hasn't thrown a slipper at the footman since. You make a mental note, find out where Lady Bingham shops. In the parlor, pamphlets from visiting physicians sit in a neat stack. They prescribe all manner of nervine treatments, valerian drops, warm milk, quiet music, long walks, cod liver oil. A few suggest more drastic measures, electric therapy belts that jolt your kidneys into fatigue. Or worse, the rotating rest chair, a spinning contraption that looks suspiciously like a punishment wheel. It's ironic, you think, how this affliction seems to skip the poor. The maids sleep like stones. The lamplighter looks positively refreshed each morning. Yet, in the bedrooms of the well-fed and over-read dreams are rare commodities. You know what they'd say if you admitted to tossing and turning, that it's nerves, weak nerves. Your mother once warned that your cousin Harriet was delicate, which was the family euphemism for lying in bed all afternoon, fretting over poetry and lace samples. She was sent to a seaside retreat for her insomnia. 3 weeks later, she eloped with a French cellist. A treatment of sorts. You find yourself wondering whether people in the Middle Ages lay awake like this. Did monks in stone abbeys toss and turn under scratchy wool blankets, staring up at ceilings dripping with candle smoke? Probably not. They didn't have Gaslight's newspapers or nightly tea, laced with existential dread. A fire burns low in the grate, casting long fingers of orange across the floor. You settle in a chair and try not to think. But thinking is all you seem able to do lately. Your mind flips through old letters, embarrassing conversations, unspoken anxieties. You haven't paid the dressmaker. You may have insulted the vicar's wife. The milkman gave you a look that could mean anything. You sigh. Dr. Humblethwaite suggested you try opium as a last resort, but you've seen what that did to your uncle. He now speaks exclusively in verse, and once mistook a chamber pot for a melon. No thank you. Instead, you glance toward the kitchen, where the faint scent of yesterday's roast lingers. Somewhere in that same space sits a half-wilted head of lettuce. It's laughable. You're a grown adult, a person of means illiterate and socially respected member of society. And yet, you're about to raid the pantry for salad to fix your brain. But why not after all? Lettuce has been whispered about in more than one circle. A sleeping draught for the virtuous, cooling to the blood, gentle on the bowels. A tonic, they say, for frayed nerves and sleepless minds. Dioscorides, the ancient Greek physician, believed lettuce had sedative properties. The Romans ate it at the end of meals to encourage restful nights. Even King George III was rumored to have ordered it grown in his garden for nightly use. So maybe you're not mad after all, just historically informed. You rise, strike a match, and carry your candle down the hall. In the flicker of flame shadows, leap and dance. You don't know if lettuce will work, but it certainly can't hurt. And in this sleepless world, where even doctors recommend reciting the Psalms until the mind tires ahead of lettuce, feels downright modern. You open the pantry door, locate the leafy bundle, and cradle it like a promise. Time to see what dreams may come. You stand barefoot in the kitchen, cradling a head of limp, waxy lettuce, like it's an ancient relic. A whisper of coal soot clings to the corners of the room, and the hearth gives off a slow, dying warmth. Everything is hushed. Even the ticking of the wall clock seems afraid to interrupt your moment of leafy revelation. Funny, isn't it? You used to scoff at the herbalist's shop, tucked between the fishmonger and the hattery. Now you're reenacting an amateur apothecary scene from a Dickens novel, hoping that vegetables can mend your fraying brain. But here's the thing. Victorians don't just eat food. They imbue it with personality character, even morality. Lettuce. Oh, she's modest, cooling, feminine, no spice, no drama. In the prudish culinary caste system of the era, lettuce is the maiden aunt of ingredients always present, rarely exciting, but quietly believed to be good for you. Which brings us to your latest bedtime hope, sleep as moral achievement. See, somewhere between the stiff corsets and stricter sermons, the Victorians decided that sleeping well wasn't just a health matter, it was a moral one, A good night's rest meant you were balanced, virtuous, not given to temptation hysteria or worse overstimulation. Insomnia, on the other hand, reeked of inner unrest, as if your very soul needed ironing. Historians still argue whether this moralization of sleep was the product of religion empire fatigue or sheer boredom. But by the mid-19th century, staying up all night wasn't just exhausting, it was suspicious. You light a second candle, its tiny flame crackling like it knows something. The gas line in the kitchen flickers behind its protective globe, casting an anemic glow over the butcher's block. You fetch a pot, fill it with water, and plop in the leafy culprit. It floats, like it knows it's being sacrificed for your sanity. As the water warms, steam curls up soft and ghost-like. It smells faintly green, earthy, medicinal in a way that's difficult to define, but easy to believe in when you're desperate. Outside, a cat screeches somewhere in the alleyway. You flinch. Your nerves are so frayed you'd probably faint if a pigeon so much as sneezed. You breathe in deeply. The lettuce broth simmers quietly. You're not alone in this ritual. Across the empire, people are whispering about the lettuce cure. Some brew it into soup. Others steep the leaves like tea. One lady in Bristol supposedly swears by placing raw leaves under her pillow to absorb the bad dreams, she says. No word yet on whether her pillow smells like salad dressing. Your housekeeper, Mrs. Pendleton, once tried to dissuade you from buying from the herbalist, saying lettuce is for rabbits, not rest. She swears by gin and a Bible verse. But the medical journals, well, some of them are starting to take lettuce seriously. Or at least pretend they do. There's even a specific species they whisper about in educated circles, Lactuca virosa, or wild lettuce. Don't let the name fool you. It doesn't dance or cause hallucinations, but it's supposedly more potent than your average salad bar variety. Known colloquially as opium lettuce, it contains a bitter white latex that smells vaguely like crushed daisies and crushed hope. Victorians believed it had mild sedative properties, though they never quite agreed on how much you'd have to consume before it kicked in. The pot burbles, and you lean over it, allowing the steam to hit your face. Your skin dews with warmth. Your mind ever so slightly begins to unclench. It might be the ritual. It might be the warmth. Or it might be the fact that you haven't had a proper meal since tea. But something about this feels ancient, reassuring. You fetch a tin mug, one of those dented ones you used to bring on picnics, before insomnia made every outing seem exhausting. You ladle in the broth. It's slightly bitter on the nose with hints of boiled wallpaper. You take a sip. It's not terrible, not great either, but there's an odd comfort in it, like drinking something your grandmother once promised would make the fever break. In the dining room, portraits of your ancestors stare down, as if questioning your life choices. One of them, Great-Uncle Bartholomew, once tried to cure his wife's insomnia with ice baths and stern lectures. She ran off with a stage actor. You suppose lettuce is at least less humiliating. You carry the mug back to the parlor and sink into the high-backed chair. The candlelight dances along the carved mahogany. You sip slowly, letting the warmth trickle down your throat and settle into your belly. Maybe this isn't just about sleep. Maybe this is about permission, the permission to rest, to soften, to turn off the relentless productivity the Victorians are so proud of. The lettuce isn't just a cure, it's a rebellion. Quiet, leafy defiance against the tyranny of self-improvement. You think about writing a letter to your cousin, dear Beatrice. I have boiled my first lettuce and lived to tell the tale, but decide against it. Let this be your secret for now. The room grows still. The fire cracks. The last embers glow with sleepy resignation. And for the first time in weeks, your jaw unclenches. Your breathing slows. You feel heavier. Is it the lettuce? Is it belief? Or is it just sheer exhaustion from chasing sleep like it owes you rent? Hard to say. But you don't get up. You don't pace. You just sit there, warm mug in hand, letting the lettuce do what it must, and for once you stop fighting. The next morning the house is still. Even the birds seem to chirp a little more quietly, as if afraid to disturb your fragile victory. You wake in your chair mug tipped over in your lap, dried lettuce broth marking your nightgown like some ancient baptismal stain, and you realize you slept. It wasn't perfect, your neck hurts, and there's a crick in your back that might require a priest, but you slept. A few precious hours. A foggy, dreamless coast of peace. You'd forgotten how good it felt just to not remember being awake. You rise slowly, like someone emerging from a deep pond blinking into morning. Maybe there's something to this lettuce business after all. That day, you find yourself watching people with new curiosity. The greengrocer's cart on the corner. The cook's hurried walk to the market. The elderly woman in widow's black eyeing the arugula with suspicion. Do they know? Do they use it? How many are silently simmering lettuce behind closed doors, ashamed to admit their faith in a vegetable? Because this cure, this humble green miracle has spread in whispers, not proclamations. No royal decree, no scientific consensus. Just quiet letters, recipes passed hand to hand. A cousin here, a neighbor there. That's how the lettuce leaf enters the culture, like a secret handshake among the weary. You retrieve an old recipe book from the pantry. It belonged to your great-aunt, a formidable woman who once told a bishop to sit down and stop droning. Flipping through brittle pages, you find it nestled between a barley broth and a note about chamomile tea. For nights too restless for prayer, boil a fistful of garden lettuce in water. Strain, sweeten lightly. Drink warm. That's it. No dosage. No warnings. Just quiet confidence. You follow it that night, though you don't bother sweetening. You've developed a fondness for the earthy bitterness. It reminds you of dry sermons and overcooked spinach. Comforting in its own strange way. Victorian households weren't built for comfort, you remind yourself. They were built for structure, timetables, respectability, meals at fixed hours, curtains closed at dusk, and above all, rest at the proper time. Sleep wasn't just a biological necessity, it was a domestic obligation. A quiet household by 9 o'clock reflected well on its master. A restless one, cause for neighborhood concern. Some families even went so far as to hang bell pulls beside the bed, one tug if you couldn't sleep, two if you suspected Satan was involved. You sip your second mug of lettuce broth and wonder if sleep cures were just another extension of that obsession with order, everything in its place, including your dreams. Historians still debate whether the lettuce craze ever reached true medical legitimacy. There's no formal decree in the journals, no grand lettuce trials, just scattered anecdotes, faint and fleeting like dreams, scribbled in a diary. Some physicians endorsed it half-heartedly. Others mocked it as kitchen superstition. But the people believed. In drawing rooms and servants' quarters alike, lettuce became a quiet companion to the night. Sometimes served in soups, sometimes soaked in vinegar. A few eccentric souls even smoked dried lettuce leaves in pipes, convinced the fumes would lull the nerves into velvet compliance. It didn't. It mostly just made them cough, and yet you understand the desperation that would lead someone to roast a salad over an open flame. You try a new variation, adding a pinch of nutmeg. It improves nothing. The broth now tastes like disappointment and Christmas. Still, the ritual is soothing. The boiling, the steam, the hush of the house, as everyone settles into their nighttime habits. Your maid yawns into her sleeve. The cat curls into its usual corner, and you, wrapped in a shawl, sip from your mug like a priest at vespers. You start keeping a little notebook beside your bed. Each night you write, drank lettuce at 9:15, slept until 2:30, dreamed of horses. The entries grow longer. Sleep arrives more often. Not always, but enough to make you hopeful. And that truly is half the cure. You even begin recommending it in careful, conspiratorial tones. Over tea with your cousin, at the dressmaker's. Have you tried the lettuce, you murmur like a spy passing state secrets? Some laugh, others raise eyebrows, but a few lean in eyes, tired, and whisper, "Yes, it helps, doesn't it?" It does. Maybe. Or maybe it's the knowing you've done something, that you're not powerless, that you've claimed a sliver of agency in a world that otherwise controls when you eat what you wear and how you behave in every waking moment. At night, the city grows quiet. The gaslights hum. The fire dies low, and once again you sit with your mug of midnight green breathing in the warmth. Sleep doesn't always come, but it comes more often. And when it doesn't, you're at least not angry about it. Not anymore. You stare into the embers and think, maybe this is the cure too. Maybe the real medicine is the silence, the slowness, the permission to sit still and not perform. Maybe the lettuce is just the excuse. You're in the apothecary's shop again this time, under the pretense of refilling your foot balm. But we both know that's not why you're here. You pretend to browse, while your eyes dart toward the wooden shelves lined with amber bottles, corked jars, and faded labels in frilly copperplate script. The air smells of licorice old wood and crushed roots. A bell chimes gently as the door shuts behind you. The assistant, a young man with soft hands and a mustache, too ambitious for his face, asks if you need help. You murmur something about nervous agitation. He doesn't blink. Everyone's nervous these days. May I recommend a sleep tonic he offers? Mild, calming, herbal, very fashionable with the clergy. You allow him to lead you to a narrow shelf labeled soporifics. That word again. It's become as familiar to you as please and thank you. There it is, Lactuca virosa, tucked between Valeriana officinalis, and something ominously labeled female restorative. You lift the bottle. The label promises rest without harsh after-effects. It says nothing about taste. You glance at the list of ingredients. Dried wild lettuce sap, hops, a trace of lemon balm, and just in case the Victorian sleep gods aren't watching, a few drops of diluted laudanum, enough to help, not enough to make you compose poetry in the bath. Victorian herbalism exists in this curious middle space, where science meets superstition for a lukewarm handshake. On one end, you've got the medical men of Harley Street, dishing out tinctures with Latin names and degrees from Cambridge. On the other, you've got Mrs. Dingley in the countryside, whose cures come from hedgerows and gossip. And in the middle, people like you, the cautiously desperate. Historians still debate whether Victorian herbalism ever bridged that divide between folklore and medicine. Some insist it laid the groundwork for modern pharmacology. Others say it was a fad for the bored and bloated. The truth, as usual, is probably somewhere in between, like your own experience. Not exactly scientific, not exactly nonsense. You take the bottle home, That night you combine it with your usual lettuce broth. You're not sure if this counts as doubling the dose or simply covering your bets. Either way, it feels official, ritualistic. You even light a fresh beeswax candle for the occasion. Sitting in your favorite chair, wrapped in your shawl, you sip your new concoction and wonder how many other people are doing the same thing. In the flickering hush of their parlors, somewhere out there, a school teacher in Bath might be preparing her third lettuce tincture of the week. A young solicitor in Brighton could be sneaking it into his nightly tea, terrified someone at Chambers will catch him treating sleep like a symptom. The funny thing is, you're not even sure why lettuce was chosen. The Victorians had access to so many more potent plants, opium poppy, belladonna, henbane. Lettuce, by comparison, is laughably gentle. But maybe that was the point. Because while belladonna might put you to sleep, it might also put you 6 feet under. Lettuce simply suggests rest. It coaxes. It doesn't demand. You take another sip. Bitter. Comforting. Familiar now. The gaslight dims behind its frosted glass. Shadows bloom across the rug like ink in water. You feel yourself soften. And then, there's a knock at the door. You jolt upright, heart-hammering like you've just been caught doing something indecent. It's only Elsie, bless her, carrying in the post, and a pot of hot water. Didn't mean to startle you, miss. She whispers, eyes flicking to your mug. She pauses. Smells like the sleepy stuff. You blush. She knows. Mrs. Pendleton says it's all nonsense, she adds. But I don't mind. You seem nicer in the morning when it works. You almost laugh. Almost. After she leaves, you take out your notebook. Tonight's entry, added tonic. Felt effects quickly. Dreams unclear. Woke before sunrise, but rested. No haunting thoughts. Elsie noticed. You're cataloging your experience like a naturalist, observing a rare bird. But that's what the Victorians do, isn't it? Measure, annotate, record, even when they're boiling lettuce in the middle of the night. You finish your mug, blow out the candle, and head to bed. The sheets are cool. The pillows smell faintly of lavender and hope. You lie there, eyes open for a while, watching the ceiling turn from black to gray in the gentle pre-dawn light. And you think perhaps this is the only science that matters. Not what's in the bottle, but how you carry the quiet, how you let yourself believe. Maybe belief is half the cure. You're back in the kitchen again. Same chair, same shawl, same pot on the stove hissing gently as steam curls upward like a sleepy ghost. This time, however, there's a new addition, a spoonful of molasses to cut the bitterness. The syrup oozes into the lettuce broth, like a sleepy ribbon, dark and slow. You stir, watching the leaves wilt into submission. This has become your evening performance, hasn't it? A solo ritual for a one-person audience. The curtain rises at 9:30. Act 1, slice. Act 2, simmer. Final act, sip, sigh, and surrender. You chuckle softly. If anyone asked you a year ago what you thought of lettuce, you'd have said it's decorative, something to bulk up a sandwich. Certainly not something that could rival chloroform as a sleep aid. But in a time when many remedies came with side effects, like fainting hallucinations or sudden death, lettuce had one remarkable thing going for it. It was harmless. Mostly. They called it the poor man's laudanum. It didn't cloud the mind or make you wax poetic about the color blue. It didn't spark addiction or scandal, but it might let you fall asleep without praying to 6 saints and a spare apostle. You sip the latest version of your brew. It's thicker now thanks to the molasses. Almost comforting. Like sleepy gravy. Across town, there's an article being printed for the London Medical Record. A letter from a country doctor in Devon, claiming success in treating hysteric nocturnal agitation with lettuce syrup and warm foot baths. Historians still argue whether these letters were real cases or marketing fiction planted by tonic sellers. But for now, it's spreading. Lactuca virosa is the plant of the moment, at least in the bedrooms of the desperate and the quietly hopeful. The working poor, of course, have little time for lettuce dreams. Most of them are too exhausted to be insomniacs. But even among the lower classes, a murmur is starting. A charwoman on King's Lane sells bundles of wild lettuce she foraged herself. A cobbler's wife in Whitechapel trades dried leaves for tea cakes. And in your own kitchen, you're learning the art of boiling it just long enough to release the milky sap too long, and it goes bitter too short, and it's useless. Timing it, turns out, is everything. Just like with sleep. There's something sweetly rebellious about it, you think. You're not downing a pill. You're not being locked in a darkened room by a physician with mutton chops and questionable theories about brain vapors. You're reclaiming your own cure with your own hands. Tonight, you take your lettuce broth to the drawing room. The fire is out, but the coals still glow faintly. You wrap yourself in the blanket you usually reserve for sick days. A good sign. You're finally treating your sleeplessness like the condition. It is not a personal failing, but something worth tending to with gentleness. You sit. You sip. You wait. Your thoughts are quieter now. The endless to-do list has receded. The embarrassment over your insomnia has faded into something softer, almost tender. You've stopped blaming yourself for not sleeping. You've even stopped blaming the city. And now that the blame is gone, you feel something even more surprising. Gratitude. For this moment. For the warmth. For the bitter sweetness on your tongue. For the silence. It's hard to explain, but it feels sacred. A hush that holds you. A pause in the clamor of being alive. A softness that lettuce of all things has helped you find. You think of the other remedies you've tried. Laudanum too strong. Warm beer too gassy. Reading sermons too effective. But you'd rather not wake up clutching Leviticus. Lettuce, on the other hand, doesn't knock you out. It doesn't take sleep. It offers it. A quiet gift. You finish your cup and rest your head back against the chair. The upholstery smells faintly of dust and sunshine, like all the best old things. You listen to the night, the faint creak of the house, the whisper of wind, the occasional clatter of a coal cart rolling down the street. And slowly, gently, you begin to drift. You don't fall into sleep like a stone dropped into a well. You glide into it like a boat, pushed gently from the shore. Your dreams come hazy and slow. A garden of fountain, a long table set for tea. Somewhere in the corner of that dream, you think you see a head of lettuce wearing spectacles and nodding wisely. But even your subconscious knows that's absurd. Still, you smile in your sleep. And for once, you don't wake until morning. The next evening, you're invited to dinner at the Connors house, one of those long, linen-draped affairs, where the silver is polished to a mirror, and the conversation is just barely louder than the clink of forks. You're not entirely thrilled, of course. Social engagements have become landmines lately, one wrong comment, and someone launches into a tirade about the moral decline of society due to railway timetables. But tonight's different. As the guests filter into the parlor, you hear a familiar phrase floating through the candlelit chatter, soporific stews. Your ears perk up like a dog hearing the word walk. Mrs. Connor, resplendent in burgundy silk and faux modesty, is explaining her new culinary regimen to a cluster of half-bored women and their husbands, who are clearly praying for a decanter to fall from the sideboard and end their misery. Oh yes, she declares I include lettuce in nearly every course now, particularly the evening soup. Just a handful of wild variety, very fashionable. Promotes moral sleep. You raise an eyebrow. Moral sleep. She catches your expression and winks. Don't scoff, dear. I haven't had a bout of night wandering in weeks. You nod, sipping your sherry. So it's official now. Lettuce has graduated from whispered kitchens to social menus. Dinner is a quiet performance. Clear consommé with floating green shreds. Steamed trout on a bed of lettuce leaves for aesthetic balance. A surprisingly rich ragout with bits of something green and bitter tucked inside like little edible secrets. It's not unpleasant. In fact, it's cozy. A soft-edged meal designed not to excite, but to calm. No fiery spices, no pungent sauces, just gentle vegetal comfort. Victorian haute cuisine meets the sleep aid aisle. As you dab the corners of your mouth with linen, you realize this isn't about flavor. It's about purpose. Every course whispers the same intention. Let go, slow down, sink softly into yourself. Even the dessert, a mild blancmange, scented faintly with lemon and lettuce water, you swear it's true, carries the same sleepy note. You half expect someone to blow out the candles and pass around nightcaps before dessert forks are even collected. Historians still argue whether these lettuce-laced menus were an actual culinary trend or just the eccentricity of a few anxious hosts. But you're starting to see it everywhere. There's a recipe clipping in your neighbor's paper for restful rabbit stew. The rabbit, notably, is not the only thing being simmered. A grocer on Fleet Street advertises evening greens specially selected for their cooling and somnolent qualities. A fashionable widow at your dressmaker's casually mentions her lettuce diet for the nerves. You don't know whether to be thrilled or alarmed, because what was once your private experiment has become the latest Victorian lifestyle brand. Lettuce for sleep. Lettuce for virtue. Lettuce for moral digestion, and always served with the same smug subtext, I sleep well, because I eat like a nun with a herb garden. You sip your tea, wondering what the Romans would think of this. They used lettuce too, of course, but for both ends of the night. Ancient feasts began with romaine to stimulate appetite, and ended with wild lettuce to bring on sleep. A plant of contradictions. But then, aren't we all? Back at home, you unlace your boots and sit down at your kitchen table. The house is quiet. The coals are low. The cat blinks at you from the windowsill, already half asleep. You reach for your pot, your leaves, your spoon. It's become almost ceremonial now, like lighting a candle in church. You boil, you strain, you sip. Tonight's entry in your notebook reads dined at Connor's. Lettuce in 4 courses. Felt absurd but also soothed. Do not recommend lettuce blancmange. You smile. Because even in the absurdity, there's comfort. In a world where every cure comes with a cost addiction madness. Liver spots. The lettuce remains gentle. Safe. A friend. It might not be a miracle, but it is dependable. And tonight, you need dependable more than you need a cure. The broth cools in your hands. The room darkens. And you feel your body begin its quiet descent, not like falling, not like floating, but like slowly remembering something you forgot how to do. Sleep. Tonight, your house smells like dried leaves and hot metal. In the kitchen, the hearth is burning low, and your little black teapot sits squat and loyal on the trivet, gently steaming. You're not making tea. Not really. You're making ritual, and tonight's blend is your latest experiment. Lettuce water, orange peel, and 3 drops of clove tincture. You think it might be overkill, but you're feeling bold. You've leaned into this now, haven't you? No longer just a reluctant dabbler. You've become a curator of sleep, a bedtime alchemist. You have your tools, dried herbs in tins, amber bottles with droppers measuring spoons small enough to dose a fairy, and your domestic rituals have expanded, no longer just sipping broth and praying for unconsciousness. Now you prepare the room. You draw the curtains in soft silence. You place your hand-stitched sleep pillow stuffed with hops and lavender into its linen case. You dim the lights. You turn down the bedspread. And just before you slip into your chair, you uncap a bottle of lettuce and valerian tonic and let 3 drops fall into the cooling brew. Mrs. Pendleton thinks you've gone slightly mad. People used to just go to bed, she mutters, scrubbing at a dish. You nod. And people used to die from toothaches. She snorts but lets it go, because she's seen the change in you. Your mornings are less grim, your eyes less red-rimmed. You don't snap at the butcher's boy anymore when he brings the wrong bread. You're still tired, sure, but not haunted. These rituals aren't just science or superstition. They're comfort, predictability, and in a world where the newsboy's shouting about another train derailment, and your neighbor's wife is being treated for hysteria of the spine, comfort is its own form of medicine. Historians still debate how much of Victorian domestic medicine was placebo versus practice. But if placebo is defined as something that works, because you believe it will, then frankly you're fine with it. Because belief, as it turns out, is remarkably effective when you're desperate. You sit back warm, mug in hand, and breathe in the scent earthy lettuce, bright citrus, and that sharp kiss of clove. Somewhere between bitter and pleasant. Like life, you suppose. You think of your mother's bedtime routines. They involved castor oil and psalms. Not exactly relaxing. Then, there was your Aunt Cecilia's method gin applied liberally. She slept like a corpse, and woke like one too. No thank you, but this quiet act of self-care feels different, empowering, even a little luxurious. Imagine taking time for yourself, not because you're sick, but because you're tired, and that's enough. You sip, and the warmth spreads down your throat, curls into your chest. Outside the city whispers. You know others are doing this too. You picture a widow in Bristol soaking dried lettuce in muslin bags and steeping it in her kettle. A young governess in Derby sketching wild lettuce plants in her notebook during a country walk, already planning to dry and store the leaves in her nightstand drawer. Maybe even a clergyman secretly dosing his chamomile with lettuce syrup under the guise of digestive health. There's something oddly intimate about it all, this shared secret among strangers, the brotherhood of the bitter leaf. You let the thought roll around as you set your mug down and begin to prepare your tinctures for the coming week. You now keep small bottles in a carved box near the fire, Lactuca valerian lemon balm, a dried poppy head you haven't dared to use yet. Each vial is labeled in your own hand, tied with string tucked into cotton. There's something immensely satisfying about it. Your own sleepy apothecary. One of your bottles came from an herbalist named Miss Ellen, who works out of a cramped alley off Cheapside and wears 4 shawls at once. She talks to her plants, and occasionally to you. Her lettuce syrup is sharp and dark as ink. It knocks you out in less than 20 minutes. She calls it midnight velvet. You haven't told anyone you bought it. Some things are too precious to explain. Tonight, you take a single drop and stir it into your cup. You add 2 pinches of dried apple peel and a curl of orange zest. The result is practically a potion. You sip slowly, savoring the strange harmony of flavors. Bitter, sweet citrus, sleepy. Then you settle into your chair and close your eyes. You don't dream of trains or worry about the unpaid milliner's bill. You don't imagine telegrams or fire or collapsing bridges. You drift instead through something soft and green, a garden perhaps. Or maybe just the feeling of rest, shaped like leaves. And in that moment, there is no past, no future, just warmth and quiet and sleep. You're in the drawing room sipping your usual brew when you catch sight of the latest issue of the Illustrated London News on the side table. And there it is, nestled between a dispatch from the colonies and a woodcut of some terrifyingly fashionable corset, an advertisement in flowery type promising lettuce sleep tonic, as recommended by the Society of Modern Nerve Medicine. You nearly spill your cup. This is new. You lean in, squinting at the small print beneath the bold promise. A safe, natural remedy for the weary soul and overtaxed brain. Composed of wild lettuce hop flowers, balm, and a whisper of nature's comfort. You almost choke on that one. Nature's comfort, indeed. Likely as not, it's mostly sugar water and ambition. But it's happening, isn't it? Lettuce has escaped the quiet kitchens and grandmother's recipes. It's a product now, a branded, bottled lifestyle. Patent medicines are all the rage these days. You can't walk 5 feet in London without seeing a poster promising to fix your liver, your blood, your hairline, and your prospects. And now, they're after your sleep. You flip through the paper. Another ad: slumber syrup favored by bishop scholars and nervous brides. One more: restore all night. Drops, guaranteed to calm the hysteria of the hour. You sigh. Victorian quackery is in full swing. Historians still debate whether these patent medicines were actively harmful or just glorified molasses. Some were genuinely dangerous, laced with opium, cocaine, or God knows what else. Others were mostly harmless, placebo-heavy tonics that just happened to cost more than a good roast dinner. But they all had one thing in common promise: the dream that rest could come in a bottle, that fatigue had a cure, that the madness in your mind could be drowned out with just the right syrup. And now, lettuce is part of the game. You visit the local chemist the next morning, curiosity tugging at your skirt. The shelves are practically groaning under the weight of glass bottles, each with an elegant label and dubious Latin. Looking for anything in particular, the chemist asks, cheerful and overconfident, the way only a man in a pinstripe waistcoat can be. I heard you say lightly that there's a lettuce tonic. He perks up. Several very fashionable with the ladies, and nervous gentlemen too. He gestures grandly, as if introducing a gallery of oil paintings. There's nocturne elixir with a wax seal, and fake gold foil, verdant rest, which boasts both wild lettuce and soul-calming fennel essence, and your personal favorite Somni leaf, featuring an engraving of a woman asleep in a bed of lettuce, like some cabbage-bound sleeping beauty. You choose the least offensive-looking bottle and ask, does it work? He shrugs. If you believe it does. At least he's honest. Back home, you uncork it with more skepticism than hope. It smells like licorice and cut grass. You dip a spoon and taste it. Sweet. Syrupy. Slightly bitter. If nothing else, it'll coat your throat before sleep. You sit by the fire and try to decide how you feel, because this shift isn't just about sleep. It's about commerce, capitalizing on exhaustion, turning rest into a marketable dream. There's a certain irony in it, of course. That lettuce, the humblest of plants, has now been drafted into the Victorian war on sleeplessness and is being mass-produced in glittery bottles to soothe the very nerves that capitalism frayed in the first place. You take another sip. The syrup coats your tongue like honey, left too long on the shelf. You don't hate it, but you don't trust it either, because it's not the same as your slow ritual. It's not the same as simmering leaves and sitting in the quiet. This is something else entirely. A shortcut. A promise with a price tag. You think about the old recipes, the clippings, the careful boiling, the moments of peace stolen back from the chaos of daily life. Those had meaning. This feels manufactured. Still, you write in your notebook tried Somni-Leaf. Slept 4 hours. Felt heavier. No dreams. Not unpleasant. Unsure whether real or imagined. You won't throw it out, but you tuck the bottle behind your proper herbs, because you've learned something the apothecaries don't advertise. Sleep can't be bought. It has to be invited, courted, treated like a guest, not a transaction. And while patent tonics may offer convenience, they lack the soul of your little kettle, the hiss of steam the bitter leaf made warm by care. So tonight, you return to the old ways. You boil, you steep, you sip, and you settle into the chair by the fire, wrapped in your shawl and your quiet satisfaction. Outside, the city races toward progress. But here, in your softly lit parlor time, hold still. And sleep at last arrives unbottled, unpaid for, and deeply earned. It's a Thursday, and the sky is already the color of ash by 5 o'clock. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders and peer out the front window, watching as the fog creeps through the streets like a sleepy serpent. The lamplighter trudges by with a crooked ladder and a slower step than usual. He looks tired, not the kind of tired that a nap fixes, but the kind that sits deep in the spine like winter. You wonder if he sleeps well. He probably does. People like him usually do. By the time he finishes climbing ladders and lighting gas lamps for miles, his body probably collapses into rest, whether his mind likes it or not. You, on the other hand, still have energy to be exhausted. It's strange, this divide. You'd think that being physically spent would be the problem. But in truth, it's often the thinking classes, the ones with fewer blisters and more books, who lie awake at night. But now something curious is happening. The lettuce cure is trickling downward. You notice it first in a passing comment from Elsie. She's been sleeping like the dead, she says, ever since her sister started steeping weeds in their tea at night. You raise an eyebrow, and she adds, "Oh, not real weeds. Just greens, lettuce and such. Bit of an old wives' thing." You don't correct her. Instead, you listen, because the trend is spreading quietly, stubbornly, like ivy. The middle class flirted with it. The gentry turned it into dinner-party banter. But now, the working class is picking it up one wilted leaf at a time. And it's not just tea. Down at the fishmonger's, you overhear a boy brag that his mother makes a stew so sleepy we call it fog. A baker on Fulham Road swears by a breakfast roll made with dried lettuce and milk. And in one alley behind the marketplace, you catch sight of a small, handwritten sign pinned to a makeshift stall. Night salad 2 pence. For rest, no questions. You can't help but smile. Historians still debate whether this was organic cultural diffusion or the result of clever marketing from patent medicine companies who saw lettuce as a cheap, low-risk ingredient. Some suggest it was just the latest in a string of remedies picked up out of sheer exhaustion and passed along like gossip. Others point to rising literacy rates and increased circulation of health pamphlets. But what you see is something else entirely: community. A shared knowledge born from trial, error, and desperation. A tacit agreement that, lettuce absurd as it seems, might offer something the tonics and doctors couldn't: gentleness, affordability, a solution without shame. You walk the neighborhood that afternoon, just to feel the cold and clear your head. On a narrow street, lined with brick cottages, you hear a girl reciting a rhyme to herself: lettuce leaf and bitter root. Boil it in your mother's boot. Sip it hot and drink it slow. Then to bed, to dreams you go. You want to stop and ask her where she learned it, but you don't. You just tuck it away in your mind like a strange little charm. That night, you add a second mug to your routine for Elsie. She doesn't ask for it, but when you offer, she accepts with a quiet, "Thanks, miss." She doesn't even ask what's in it, just drinks and sighs and smiles. You sit together for a while, not speaking. The house is quiet. The cat snores. The kettle hisses. And for once, there's no awkwardness in the shared silence, just mutual understanding. You don't need a title or social status to be tired, and you certainly don't need one to crave peace. Your notebook tonight includes a rare entry: made 2 mugs, shared with Elsie, slept before midnight, dreamed of a field, quiet, green. Because that's how it feels now, less like a fight, more like a return. You imagine the factory boy, the washerwoman, the bookkeeper all cradling their own strange little mugs. Some with broth, some with stew, some with crumpled leaves steeped in chipped cups. All of them tired, all of them hoping. Lettuce isn't a miracle, but in the cold hush of night, it feels close enough. The asylum gates are cold, tall, iron spiked, and painted in a shade of black so deep it seems to absorb the afternoon light. They creak open as you pass through, escorted by a cousin who happens to be a junior physician here. Just for a visit, he says, though his tone suggests otherwise. You're not ill, not in any formal sense, but he knows of your sleep troubles, and he's convinced you might find this educational. You're not so sure. The building itself looms over a garden that once tried to be cheerful ivy, choking a weather-worn statue of Hygeia, goddess of health, who now stares blindly at the ground. Inside, everything smells of soap, boiled wool, and something faintly metallic. A long corridor stretches out like a throat. Footsteps echo. Doors clank shut. Keys jangle. You feel your heart start to race, not out of fear, out of recognition, because this is where sleeplessness ends if it festers long enough, not in elegant parlors or tidy notebooks, but in rooms with barred windows and padded walls. You pass one patient mumbling prayers to his shoes. Another woman simply stands staring at the ceiling lips, parted eyes unblinking. She hasn't spoken in 4 years, your cousin murmurs. Insomnia to start. Hallucinations by the 2nd year. Now, this. You swallow. Hard. Historians still argue whether insomnia was a cause of madness or a symptom of it. The Victorian asylum records are ambiguous at best, sometimes listing chronic wakefulness as a separate entry, sometimes folding it into broader categories like hysteria, melancholia, or nervous collapse. What's clear is that sleep, or the lack of it, haunted both doctors and patients alike. You're led into the small apothecary wing, where tonics and treatments are prepared. Among the bottles of chloral hydrate and camphor spirits sits a dusty vial, labeled simply Lactuca tinct. Your cousin notices your gaze. Oh, that one's harmless. A folk remedy mostly. Doesn't do much for the severe cases, but... He pauses. Some of the women like it. Calms them. or maybe just gives them something to believe in. You ask if they use it often. He shrugs. Only when the stronger things fail. It's not impressive enough for official reports, but it doesn't hurt either. That night back home, you sit with your mug and let the steam kiss your cheeks. You think about the woman who doesn't speak, about the boy whose sleeplessness spun out into madness, about the thousands of unnamed souls tucked away in quiet wards, chased by their own minds because no one ever taught them how to rest. You realize how close you came to joining them. Your own insomnia never drove you mad, not quite, but it carved thin cracks into your days. It frayed your memory, stole your laughter, made you snap at people you loved. You were walking the edge of something you didn't understand, until the lettuce. You're not saying it cured you. That would be too neat, too Victorian in its faith in tidy endings. But it softened you, slowed you down, offered you a gentler path. And now, every time you sip, you think of those who don't have that path. The ones who never heard the recipe. The ones who boiled over before they ever had the chance to simmer. Your cousin gave you the vial from the asylum apothecary as a curiosity. You keep it on your shelf still corked. Its label faded, its contents untouched. A reminder, that sleep is not just rest. It is salvation. It is preservation. It is the line between peace and the places where doors lock from the outside. You sip slowly. You breathe deeply. You sleep thankfully quietly. And each morning you wake, you write another night, another mercy. You're not supposed to know this, but Queen Victoria hasn't slept well in years. You overhear it in a hushed conversation at a garden party, one of those delicate little gossip grenades lobbed by a duchess pretending not to care. Her Majesty, she says, leaning in like she's disclosing the location of a buried treasure, has taken to sipping lettuce water at night. On advice from a Bavarian herbalist, no less. You act unimpressed. But inside, you're buzzing. Because if the Queen is doing it, then suddenly this humble lettuce thing has royal legitimacy. No longer just the domain of desperate housewives and scrappy herbalists. It's ascended. It has court approval. You wonder if she drinks it from bone china. If someone in Windsor Castle is carefully straining leaves and whispering prayers under their breath. If there's a royal ledger that includes the words, 2 mugs of Lactuca broth served warm. Of course, nothing official ever confirms it. Royal correspondence is famously discreet. But word spreads quickly when insomnia plagues a monarch. Victoria's grief after Albert's death was the stuff of legend and grief, is a well-documented thief of sleep. Historians still debate whether her sleeplessness was emotional hormonal or simply the inevitable byproduct of being queen during one of the most exhausting centuries in history. But either way, the image sticks the Queen of England alone in her chambers, sipping broth made from boiled greens and praying for rest. It humanizes her in a way you weren't expecting. And more than that, it validates you. Because for all the pomp and ceremony, she's doing what you're doing, hoping that a quiet plant can hush a noisy mind. You start noticing signs everywhere. The palace gardens now include a row of wild lettuce plants, marked discreetly with brass placards. An entry in a kitchen ledger references a midnight infusion prepared weekly. Even the Times publishes a cautious article about the resurgence of Victorian-era botanical remedies, complete with an anonymous source, praising lettuce's cooling influence upon royal sensibilities. It's absurd, and somehow wonderful, because if the Queen herself can turn to lettuce, then surely no one is above it. No one too grand. No one too refined. No one too proud. You write in your notebook royal rumor lettuce in the palace. Feel strangely affirmed. If it's good enough for Victoria. And something shifts. The shame around your ritual already dissolving disappears completely. You no longer hide your ingredients when guests come. In fact, you now offer mugs at the end of dinner parties. House blend, you call it. Very in vogue. Your friends are skeptical at first, but when they hear the word palace, their resistance crumbles like stale shortbread. Even Mrs. Pendleton, lifelong cynic and frequent scoffer, accepts a mug one evening, after muttering about nagging dreams. She doesn't thank you, but she doesn't return it full either. The next morning, she's humming. Something is happening. Sleep is becoming social, acceptable, a shared goal rather than a private failure, and more surprisingly, lettuce is becoming fashionable. You pass a small boutique on Regent Street, advertising dreamwear, infused with dried herbs, including wild lettuce threads sewn into the cuffs. At the chemist, a bottle labeled Victoria's Repose now sits proudly on the front shelf. It includes a drawing of a royal silhouette and zero mention of actual approval. You smirk. That's how these things work. A whisper turns into a belief into a brand. And yet beneath the commercial gloss, you sense something real. A shift, not just in you, but in the city itself. Sleep is no longer a silent shame whispered between neighbors. It's something to seek to respect. A human need, not a personal weakness. And lettuce, humble, bitter boiled lettuce, is part of that awakening. You brew your cup that night with quiet pride. You lift it as if to toast someone far away, a monarch maybe, or just the version of yourself who once lay awake ashamed and desperate. To the sleepless you whisper, and to those who finally sleep. The room hushes, the broth warms, and the darkness wraps around you like velvet. The question creeps in sometime around midnight as you lie in bed tracing the edge of your sleep pillow with a lazy finger. Did it ever actually work? You mean the lettuce, of course, not the ritual, not the quiet evenings and the cozy mugs and the comforting hum of your own intentionality, but the lettuce itself, that pale green wilting mass, that vegetable once reserved for rabbits and side plates. Did it do anything? The thought lingers like smoke. You've drunk gallons of broth-brewed teas, mixed tonics, and collected vials. You've experimented with timings, dosages, temperatures. You've followed recipes from widows, bishops, herbalists, and the occasional rogue from Devon. And now, months in, you find yourself wondering whether it was the ingredient that helped, or everything around it. Historians still argue whether Lactuca virosa actually possessed measurable sedative properties. Some modern pharmacologists point to Lactucarium, the milky sap in the stem, as a mild sedative, perhaps comparable to chamomile or valerian in effect. Others dismiss it as folk science, with poor documentation, no proper trials, and entirely too much hope. You read a report once hidden in the back of a medical journal, stating flatly, lettuce water appears to yield no greater effect than warm water alone. You remember frowning, then boiling another pot. Because you didn't need proof. You needed peace. And now, you're not sure how much of your improved sleep is chemical, and how much is context. You didn't just change what you drank. You changed how you approached sleep. You created a space for rest, rebuilt your nights from the rubble of anxiety. Let yourself be vulnerable, soft and slow. And yes, lettuce was the cornerstone of that strange little temple. But was it sacred? Because it worked? Or because you believed it did? You shift in bed, listening to the house breathe around you. Mrs. Pendleton sleeps in the room below. You can tell, because she snores like a tea kettle with asthma. Elsie hasn't had a nightmare in weeks. Even the cat curled at your feet barely moves now during the night. Everyone sleeps, and maybe that's enough. Still, the question hums. Was it real? You try to remember your first attempts fumbling with broth, doubting every step, squinting at recipe clippings under candlelight. You remember how bitter it tasted, how silly it felt, and how deeply shockingly you wanted it to work. You remember the first night you truly slept, the tears you didn't tell anyone about, the relief, the release, placebo possibly, magic maybe, lettuce stranger. Things have healed the soul. You reach for your notebook and write, "Does it matter if it worked? I sleep. I'm kinder. I live." You set the pen down, blow out the candle, and curl into the dark. Maybe the lettuce was just a door, and you finally ready to walk through it. The lettuce leaves are crisp again. It's spring, and the markets are full of them baskets overflowing with green curls, butterhead oak leaf romaine, and yes, a modest bundle of Lactuca virosa, if you know which stall to whisper at. You run your fingers along the ridges of a head that still smells faintly of soil and dew, and for a moment you smile, remembering those bitter midnight mugs in winter, when the world felt darker than the sky. The lettuce is back in season, but your need for it isn't. You still sleep. Maybe not perfectly. There are nights when your mind hums too loud, or the city rattles outside your window. But the desperate edge is gone. You fall asleep more often than not. You dream more than you worry, and for the first time in years, you don't wake up furious with your own body. The lettuce is still part of your life, but it no longer carries the weight of salvation. Now, it's just a quiet companion, familiar, reliable, but not essential. You brew it sometimes when the air feels heavy, or your heart stirs restlessly for no reason. But mostly, it rests in the cupboard, dried, labeled, waiting just in case. You think about that as you walk through the market. You see a young woman no more than 20 holding a small bundle of greens in shaking hands, asking the vendor in a voice barely above a whisper, "Is this the one that helps with sleep?" He nods solemnly, and you recognize her. Not literally, of course, but her shape, her eyes, that quiet panic hiding beneath a veil of manners, the twitch in her hand, the exhaustion in her voice. You were her not too long ago. You pause, approach slowly, and say, "It helped me." She turns surprised, hopeful. "Truly." You nod, or maybe just doing something gentle helped. But either way, I sleep now. And that's when you realize something you hadn't before. You've become the next step in the chain. The quiet witness, the one passing on the secret. Just like your cousin did in her letter. Just like Mrs. Dingley and Miss Ellen, and that old recipe book from your great-aunt. The lettuce cure wasn't ever about miracle ingredients or measurable doses. It was about permission. Permission to slow down, to tend to yourself with gentleness, to trust that even the bitterest things might yield comfort if treated with care. Historians still argue about when the lettuce cure faded out. Some say it disappeared with the rise of pharmaceuticals pills that could guarantee sleep fast and forgettable. Others say it was pushed aside by science efficiency and the desire for something with proven results. But they miss something essential. The lettuce wasn't a cure in the clinical sense. It was a ritual, a rebellion, a quiet act of defiance against the machine of sleeplessness, and the shame that came with it. You walk home with a bundle of fresh lettuce in your basket, not because you need it, but because it reminds you of the road you traveled, the quiet nights, the slow healing, the space you carved out of chaos. At home, you prepare a small pot, not for necessity, but for nostalgia. The broth is lighter now, the bitterness gentler. You sip and sit in your chair, the same one you once wept in out of sheer exhaustion, and you marvel at how different it feels when you're not fighting your own brain. You write in your notebook spring, fresh leaves, slept well all week, still grateful, still here. Because sometimes survival looks like a cup of broth and a quiet evening, and healing doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just whispers. There's a storm outside tonight, nothing dramatic, just the low grumble of thunder and the slow sweep of rain across the windows, like someone brushing fingers down the glass. The house is warm, though, dry, still. You've lit a single candle on the table beside your chair, and the light dances across the walls in lazy ripples. You pour your last mug of the week, nothing fancy, just warm water and a few crushed dried lettuce leaves. You don't even strain them anymore. You like the way they float soft and tired, like old thoughts finally at peace. You settle in shawl around your shoulders, notebook open. The page is blank. You pause, then write, no reason for the cup tonight, just tradition. And that's true, isn't it? The need is gone, but the ritual remains, not out of desperation, but respect, for what you survived, for what you rebuilt. Because there was a time when sleep felt like an enemy, when every night was a battle, and every morning a failure. You blamed yourself. You hid it. You cursed your body, your mind, the shadows on the wall, the creaking of floorboards, the tick of the clock. You searched, tried, failed, tried again, until one day you stopped trying to win and instead started learning how to receive, to prepare space, to be quiet, to stop punishing yourself for being human. The lettuce was never a cure. Not really. It was an invitation to slow down, to soften, to hope. You close the notebook. The candle burns low. Outside, the thunder rolls away like a sigh. Inside, you're ready. Not just for sleep, but for stillness. And now, dear one, it's time. The air is heavy with calm. The room holds its breath with you. Even the shadows have curled into corners, content to rest. The last of the candlelight flutters against the walls, then surrenders, leaving only the quiet murmur of the rain and the rhythm of your own breathing. You feel your hands soften your shoulders, fall. Your eyes blink slower and slower, like the pages of a book, closing on their own. You've walked with me through the bitter steam of lettuce broth and the pale gaslight of sleepless nights. You've climbed into the silence with your fingers wrapped around something warm and leafy and strange. And now, you don't have to hold on anymore. The house is safe. The night is kind. And your body, this wonderful, weathered, beautiful thing, has earned its rest. Let the weight of the day fall behind you like an old coat. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on a stream. Let every breath deep and soften, blur the edges of the world. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to fix. You've already arrived. And maybe, just maybe, in the quiet hush of this moment, you'll feel the soft green whisper of a very old remedy, wrapping around your heart like a lullaby. Close your eyes. Sleep is here. It's gentle, and it's yours.